Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go over something that I've seen some people interested in, and I think it would be a nice thing to go over. So what does it really cost to get into making soft plastic baits as of this video, basically beginning of 2023? So there's a lot of things to figure in. I mean, there's some things that you kind of have to ask yourself that's going to change your answer basically. Do you want to make plastic baits for yourself and maybe some buddies? Maybe you just want to shoot some stuff in your garage, do it as a little bit of a hobby, and just go fish with some stuff that you like? Or are you wanting to run basically some sort of business with it to where that you can sell your production that you make? How you answer that question is going to kind of affect how you want to do this. And it also kind of matters how much money do you want to spend on this. You have multiple options, and the reason the question of that matters so much is for molds. So when you get into buying molds, you kind of got to ask yourself, do I want to spend the extra money and get a high cavity count mold so that I can run production, or am I fine with the lower cavity count because I'm just making stuff for me and my buddies? So that matters. That's something you kind of have to ask yourself. And even if you are wanting to run production, you kind of have to think about, is it worth the extra to buy the higher cavity count? Are you going to be using it enough to justify that? So a good example of that is like a stick bait mold. So if you are primarily selling stick baits, do you want to buy the 4 cavity or do you want to buy an 8 cavity? So you have to think, if you're going to be doing this a lot, so let's say the 8 cavity is $100 more. For every time you shoot that 4 cavity, you could have shot that 8 cavity and got double the production for an extra $100. And that's just a random number. It may be more than that, but you just kind of have to think, is it worth it to shoot that 4 cavity mold twice for every time that you could have just shot the 8 cavity once? So that's something to consider and something you have to kind of take into account. So when it comes to molds are your primary thing that you need. So there's a lot of options for molds. There's a lot of manufacturers. There's several different materials. You can get the stone molds, you can get the cast molds, you can get the machined molds, and it really just kind of depends what you want. The stone molds, they're okay. I don't know that I would recommend them unless you are just trying to save every absolute dollar and get into it as cheap as possible. They don't cool down very well in my opinion, and stuff tends to want to stick in them. I'm sure there's ways around that, but it's just not really ideal. So I would recommend spending the most of your budget on molds. And I only use Epic Bait molds. I really like their stuff. They are super awesome machined molds, and they don't leave a lot of room for errors to occur. So basically, these are really good beginner molds, and machining on them is just excellent. This is an example. This mold is $180 right now, but they do have cheaper ones. They have some $100, $95 molds you can get into this that are cheaper. If you're trying to get into some cheaper molds than that, you can go to Duets. Duets are kind of known to be a cheap mold, but it is one of those things that you kind of get what you pay for as far as the quality goes. So I use Epic. Like I said, you can do your research and find some other options, but I would recommend them especially for a beginner because they're very user-friendly. They don't leave a lot of room for stuff to go wrong. So with that being said, next thing you're gonna need is an injector. So an injector is kind of a place that, especially if you're a beginner, that you can cut some fat in the budget. This is a 4-ounce injector from Amazon. I just looked today, this injector is $31 shipped if you have Prime. I'm guessing I have Prime. $31, and it's a 4-ounce. It is not a bass tackle. It is not as nice as a bass tackle, but it will get the job done. Especially if you're a new person, you're probably never gonna notice the difference. Unless you're coming from like a bass tackle injector, something that's super nice, you're not gonna notice. The only complaint I have about this is it doesn't have the locking head. So sometimes if you're not careful, you will shoot the head off into your cup when you are getting all the extra out. But for 31 bucks, this is a really good option. And it's definitely something that you can use for this. So $31 there. Let's just say you buy one mold from Epic, you spend $100. You know, obviously it won't get you this mold, but you can get like a smaller disc shaker or something like that, something to practice with, a small paddle tail. So there you are, $130 into that, and you have a mold and an injector. So with that, you're also going to need a way to keep your mold shut. So you're gonna need some sort of clamps. You're either gonna need clamps or a vise. I use these Irwin clamps. I don't know that I would recommend them. They're okay. I have issues with these, but you can get a 4-pack of these on Amazon for $29.99. So they do get the job done. They have rubber ends so they don't tear up your molds and put a bunch of scratches on the outside like some of the other options do. But you can probably go to Harbor Freight and find a better option than this. Go to somewhere a little cheaper. That is an option though. You're gonna need some way to keep them closed, and if you're watching this video, you're not going to have access probably to an air vise or anything like that. Next thing you're gonna need is some plastic, obviously. Now there's a few different options. You can go to dead-on plastics, you can go to bait plastics, and I think Calhoun's still around. I've never messed with Calhoun or dead-on, but I know that they do exist. So I use bait plastics, and you kind of have two options here, and it kind of goes back to the same thing of what are you doing. You can get a gallon for about $46. And a gallon, if you're just doing this, will last you quite a while. If you're running production, it won't last that long, but if you are just hanging out, just trying some different stuff, using it as a good learning experience, start out with a gallon. They have several different options. If you want something kind of in the middle, go for like a 242 medium. Now here's the catch. You can buy this gallon for $46, or you can buy 5 gallons, and if you buy 5 gallons, it's $140 something right now. There's a tiny bit of a sale, but not much. I think it's like $6 off or something like that. And that is shipped. So basically, if you buy the 5-gallon bucket, yeah, it costs more, but you're getting 2 gallons pretty much for free. So, but you gotta have some way to get the plastic out of the 5-gallon bucket into your cups, but you can just use a little red Solo cup or anything like that. I just save my gallon things and put them back in that because it does make it easier. But there's something you need to consider. Do you want to buy 5 gallons or do you want to buy a 1 gallon? I personally buy the 5-gallon because, like I said, I get 2 gallons for free. So for me running production, it just makes sense. Now that you have your plastic, you're gonna need a Pyrex cup. You can get several different sizes of Pyrex. These are gonna run you, you know, $3 to $8 probably, depending on what size you get. So you can get those, they're pretty cheap. Not a big expense for this, but you wanna use Pyrex because it's not gonna blow up in the microwave, hopefully, unless you have a chip or anything like that. Make sure when you buy your cups that you don't have chips or cracks because it will come apart in the microwave if it does. So that kind of leads us on, okay, you're gonna need a microwave. You're gonna need some way to heat this plastic up. I would highly recommend against putting this stuff in your food microwave. Whatever microwave you use for your food, I would not use for this. I mean, you have to consider you are melting plastic in your microwave. You don't wanna do this in your food microwave. It just doesn't seem like a good idea. So what I did is I went to Walmart and just bought a basic microwave. It is a 700 watt, I do believe. Yeah, it's a 700 watt microwave. It's just a no-name brand, $55. There you go, you got a microwave you can put in your shop and you don't have to worry about contaminating your food microwave because you don't want that crap in your food microwave. So that's something to consider. You're gonna need the microwave. Another thing that's a nice to have that you don't really have to have it if you have been doing it for a while, but when you're first starting out, it's kind of hard to tell what temperature your plastic's at. And you want to make sure, like with this bait plastics, that you get it above 360 so that the plastic can make its transformation into what it's supposed to be in an end product. So what I did is I went to the clearance section of my local Tractor Supply, and they had these for about 15 bucks. And it is just a infrared thermometer, has a little laser on it so that you can tell. You can use the little stick-in thermometers, but this is just instant and you don't have to wait, and I would recommend getting one of these. So now you have your plastics, you have your molds, you have your injectors, your clamps, you have all the stuff to do that. So now you're just trying to make it look the way you want it. So there's only a couple things left that you need. So first of which being pigment. So you have a couple options here. You can buy like 4-ounce bottles of pigment, like these are from Bait Plastics. These are gonna run you about $8.99 unless you are buying a premium color. If you're buying a premium color, it will cost more, but that is for just the basics colors, and they have a lot of basic colors, so that'll pretty much get you what you need. Or you can go to Amazon and you can get a 24-pack of Mica Powder, and you can use Mica Powder instead. You can get a 24-pack of Mica Powder for like $8 or $9, maybe $11. It's pretty cheap in the long run. So that being considered, you can use Mica Powder. That's how I started to learn, because Mica Powder was cheap. You get a bunch of different varieties. I'll leave a link in the description to the pack that I use, and it's just a very basic soap making Mica Powder kit, and it's a good option for the money. So that is one option. The other thing you're gonna need is, I guess you don't have to have it, but you're probably gonna want it if you're making baits, is flake of some sort. Now, you can cheap out here a little bit in certain circumstances. This is a Hobby Lobby glitter, and this works. Now, when you cheap out on the glitter, you do run a risk of this bleeding into your plastic. So when it bleeds into your plastic, it's going to affect the color of your plastic some. You have to think this is a cheap thing of glitter, and it is not made to withstand the temperatures that high temp glitter is. So that is an option. You can get that, or you can get like, so basically these from Walmart. These are gonna be a couple dollars. I think $3 to be exact. They have several different options though, and they seem to hold up okay. Now, the caveat to that is not only could it bleed, it could also cause you issues in the microwave, assuming that it has metallic flake in it. So you have to think, when you order stuff from Bait Plastics or Lure Works or something like that, that stuff is made to go in the microwave. So this other stuff might be made for whatever reasons, they don't have the same standards. So just kind of use your brain when you're picking cheap glitter to make sure that you're not gonna have issues in your microwave. All the stuff I've had so far has been okay, but I know there are some people that have had issues with that in the past. If you want to spend a little extra, you can go on up to the Bait Plastics glitter. This is a high temp glitter that is made to withstand the temperature, and it's going to run you a little more. I don't exactly know how much these are, but they're not a whole lot. They're probably just a touch more than their pigments. So you can kind of go from there. That isn't an overly big cost. So really your only big costs are your molds. Your injector is a little bit of a cost. I mean, it is $30, so that is something to consider. And your microwave and your plastic. Everything else is fairly cheap, and you can just obtain it over time, and it's not a super big deal. So that pretty much covers what you're gonna need to get started. There are a few things that you can buy as an add-on that will help you. I would recommend picking up some worm oil to help lubricate your injector, and then you can bag baits with it if you want to, put them into bags. All that stuff is just kind of a accessory to the fact afterwards, because I mean, you can get by without it if you really need to. But yeah, so when I added this up, figuring that you spend $100 on a mold, I think you could get started for around $300. If you went to a cheaper mold, obviously you could cut down on that, but that is pretty much just getting you like one color, one flake, and one design. But like I said, a lot of this stuff you don't have to buy more than once. Once you buy your clamps, you'll have your clamps. Once you buy your injector, you'll have it. Same thing with Pyrex and all that. So as you upscale to more variety, it doesn't necessarily cost quite as much. You just have more molds, and your colorants will last for a long time. So really it's just molds. You're also gonna wanna pick up some butter knives or some kind of way to stir your plastic. But like I said, that's not a big expense. So I'm just trying to cover the big expenses here. So I would say around $300 could get you started. There's obviously room to cut a little bit of stuff out of there as far as you can cheap out in a couple places. The molds are one thing that you really have to consider cheaping out on though, because this is what is going to represent your end quality. This is the thing that is going to make your baits the best they can be. So when you cheap out and you buy a really cheap mold that may not be machined well, and the vents may clog if you clamp it too tight, I mean, do you really want to mess with that? And even if it does work, is it going to leave a good finish on your baits? A lot of people with the do-its end up painting them with some kind of high temp paint to give a better finish. With this stuff, you don't have to do that. So it's just kind of like, where do you want to start? You can always sell molds later and upgrade if that's something that you want to do. Epic molds hold their value fairly well, so that is something that is nice about having them as well. But yeah, that is a basic rundown on what it is going to cost for you to get into bait making, whether it be for you to make stuff for your buddies or just to kind of run a side hustle. So yeah, that is pretty much all you're gonna need. I would recommend a fan or some kind of ventilation, but that kind of varies depending on what you're doing or where you're doing it. If you can get good airflow, that's obviously something that you're gonna wanna do. Respirator is also something good to consider if you can't get enough ventilation. But yeah, it all just kind of depends on your situation, but those are the main things that you're gonna need. So with that being said, if this helped you out, drop a like and a subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna drop some helpful links in the description. There will be links to Epic Bait Molds. I will leave a link to this injector. So in case you wanna get the same one that I got, it works fine. And I will leave a link to these clamps and just some basic stuff for bait plastics and all that. So that way you have some good resources to go to if you want to get started on this. Super awesome project. It is a great hobby. Be warned, it is expensive when you get addicted to it, so that is something to consider. But yeah, I appreciate you watching. If you want to buy any baits from me, all that money gets to go back into this so that we can keep doing this kind of helpful stuff for you guys. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.